Hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. Welcome back to the stream, and thank you so much for joining us right at the get-go as we get things started today. I will say up front, today's stream is going to be a little bit short, so short, sweet, to the point, packed in all the information. I know we've gone pretty long the last couple of days this week, which has been so much fun, and I'm glad you guys are loving the longer format, but my dear friend has flown in all the way from Phoenix, Arizona, and is on her way to my apartment right now to spend the afternoon with me. So excited for her to get here in just a few minutes, and until then, very excited to spend the afternoon with all of you. We are live concurrently on YouTube, on Facebook, on Getter, on Rumble, and of course with our locals gang, and I'm so happy all of you guys are here. This topic that we're going to be breaking down today on the show is really important and really personal to me. If you think that maybe this might not pertain to you because you personally aren't taking hormonal birth control pills, or maybe you are a man and that is not an option yet for you, I want you to stick around. A, because it's a short enough stream that you're not going to lose your whole afternoon, but B, it also pertains to you, whether you realize it or not, and this subject is only going to become more and more prevalent and applicable to each and every one of us with each passing day, even if you don't feel like it is already. And that subject is the birth control industry and how hormonal birth control is impacting not just the physical health and reproduction rates and marriage structure in society, but specifically the mental health of women in my generation, within Generation Z. And we're going to be talking about a new study that just came out of Sweden this week that is blowing people's minds all over the internet, but I frankly am not surprised by it one bit. My personal story of how I was prescribed hormonal birth control and why I decided to quit after 9 years a few years ago, and why I will never look back, and give you some resources and suggestions for where you can go next to start asking all of the right questions if you are taking birth control and you think you might want to quit after this conversation, or if just at large you're like, this is insane, I need to learn more information. So buckle up, it's gonna be a wild ride. The reason that we're talking about this particular issue today stemmed from a new study that I found on social media last night. So this is just now making the rounds on everything all over the internet today, because the study came out on June 13th, 2 days ago, and has now made international news and headlines and has spread like wildfire all over the internet from, and I'm probably pronouncing this wrong, if anybody in the stream is from Sweden or can speak Swedish, please let me know how I pronounce this particular name of the university, but from Uppsala, I have no idea how to pronounce this. Uppsala, whatever, university. We're just going to call it the university in Sweden that made this study from here on out. They released a new study 2 days ago on June 13th that specifically is linking contraceptive pills and depression. And let me just say up front, a lot of studies that we experience as readers here in the United States about birth control, and specifically about abortion, by the way, are not coming from the United States. And I think that's really important for us to just say up front in the stream, because something I didn't really realize while I was pre-med in college studying biomedical sciences, or before I got very involved in the pro-life movement, was that America and our pharmaceutical companies and the pharmaceutical industry at large, and the healthcare industry, just really isn't interested in studying the deep long-term impacts of the medication that we are taking, or specifically of abortion, which is somewhat related to this conversation, but I think it's important for you to know up front. In America today, we do not have a national mandatory reporting law when it comes to abortion. And so as many abortions are performed in America, we can know because companies will put out the information, but there's genuinely no reporting law when an abortion ends somebody's life, a mother's life, when obviously that child's life has ended, what the impact, largely speaking, of surgical versus chemical abortion is, or any other subtopic. Most of the studies that we are getting about mental health complications and problems associated with abortion, or physical ailments that women deal with later on in their life, are not coming from America. They are coming from Europe, because countries like Sweden have mandatory reporting laws when it comes to the abortion industry. So I think it's interesting that we might not think it's directly related, but this particular article is coming out about about birth control pills and contraceptives and hormonal birth control pills from Sweden, because Sweden has come to my attention to be one of the leading countries who are asking all the right questions about pharmaceuticals, about the healthcare industry, and about very dangerous and damaging practices and or medications that are leaving a dramatic societal impact on women. So when in doubt, go research studies that are coming out of Sweden, are coming out of Denmark, are coming out of all across Europe. I think it's really fascinating that they are asking and answering all of the really big and important questions. But this particular university, again, Uppsala, I have no idea. I don't speak Swedish, so please don't hate me, came out with a study 2 days ago and found that women who were using combined contraceptive pills were at a greater risk of developing depression than women who did not. This sentence or fragment of a sentence in isolation is not surprising. We've known this for a very long time. We've known that there is a correlative, if not a causational relationship between taking hormonal birth control pills and an increased risk of depression. But what's fascinating to me is the specific numbers that this study unpacked. In particular, that contraceptive pills increased a woman's risk by 73% during the first 2 years of use of birth control pills. That's a massive increase for the average adult woman. And they remind us from this study that depression is the leading cause of bad health and disability all over the world, that there are more than 264 million people globally affected by clinical depression, and at least 25% of all women and 15% of all men experience depression that requires treatment at some point in their life all over the world. Fascinatingly, just a little coincidental situation, 1 in 4 adult women in America today seek an abortion and obtain an abortion. So I find it fascinating that the global rate of clinical depression among women all over the world is 1 in 4, 25%, and it's almost exactly the same as the women who seek and obtain an abortion. The possibility that contraceptive pills might have negative effects on mental health and even lead to depression has long been discussed, although many women choose to stop using contraceptive pills because of the influence on their mood. We're going to talk about that specific word choice later on during the stream. Until now, the picture emerging from research has not been straightforward. This study is one of the largest and widest ranging to date, following more than a quarter of a million women from the United Kingdom from birth until menopause. So it was a Swedish university that conducted the study, but it was on specifically women in the United Kingdom. And one of their biggest findings, they said right here under the top picture, so we're going to just scroll back up. We don't have time to read the entire thing today, but I will drop right now the link to the study in all of our live chats so that you guys can go read it for yourself, because I do think that it's very important you read this entire document. Right under that picture at the very top of the article, and this is the byline that's making absolute headway all over social media. Optimistic Living is saying in our locals chat, the pronunciation is Uppsala. Uppsala. Okay, cool. I'm glad I figured it out. Thank you guys. Appreciate all of you who know Swedish and I do not. This is what I'm seeing all over social media, on Twitter, on TikTok, on Instagram, everywhere, that women who began to use contraceptive pills, hormonal birth control pills, as teenagers specifically, had a 130% higher incidence of symptoms of depression. In other words, if you are a teenager who starts taking hormonal birth control pills, like millions upon millions upon millions of teenage girls in America, in the United States, do every single day, it is just the norm to be prescribed and start taking hormonal birth control pills, then you have a 130% higher likelihood of experiencing clinical depression. And when I read this byline and all of the stuff on social media about it, my first reaction, horrifyingly, was that I wasn't surprised. No part of me was surprised whatsoever, which breaks my heart, because my personal experience taking hormonal birth control pills, my understanding of what it's done to my mental health and my body and my relationships and my lifestyle completely centered around symptoms of clinical depression and clinical anxiety and all kinds of other mental health struggles that I had to overcome throughout my teenage and college and young adult years until I decided to quit about 2 years ago. And then I stopped myself in my tracks and realized I should be shocked by that. I should be absolutely floored that we are giving, like candy, often for free, teenage girls a magic one-size-fits-all solution to all of the problems and ailments that they experience every day, packaging it as the end-all, be-all, greatest thing you could possibly do for yourself and for your body in hormonal birth control pills. And we are basically inducing the mental health crisis that we are experiencing every single day. And in the midst of that horror, nobody, no American universities, no American major politicians, none of our favorite influencers on social media, nobody in the entertainment industry, nobody is talking about it. But we all love to talk about how mental health is such a problem in society, but we rarely like to ask the question, where is it coming from? Where is this mental health epidemic coming from? Where is this mental illness coming from? For women today, and especially teenage girls, it's pretty damn obvious to me that there's at least a correlational, if not a causational effect there. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to prove it to you throughout the stream. But before I do, I just want to take a moment to share my experience and what happened to me, because I think a lot of this conversation really has been lacking in society and has been silent in our culture for far too long, simply because of the reality that we get really embarrassed and we don't like to talk about birth control because there's a connotation there that if you're taking birth control, then you're rampantly sexually active and you're trying to hook up with as many people as possible, or, you know, you're just a, you know what, an SLUT. That's what people would call you all the time if they knew that you were on birth control throughout your high school experience, which was when I was first prescribed birth control. And in reality, I think what most people in my parents' and grandparents' generation fail to understand, or maybe just haven't wrapped their head around, is that today in 2023, and even in what year was that? 2012, when I was first prescribed hormonal birth control, more often than not, you're not being handed the pill from a physician or being pushed or encouraged to take it from your healthcare provider because you want to have sex or because you are actively having sex. And the more I've talked about this openly and just shed a lot of the stigma associated with taking birth control in my own life, the more I've realized that for the vast, vast majority of young women taking birth control, they were never prescribed this solely for the reason of wanting to have sex or that they were sexually active as a kid or as a teenager. More often than not, in the majority of the times I've heard these stories, and again, this is not like a clinical statistic that I'm giving you. I couldn't tell you why most of the stories that I'm hearing are this way, but this is just an anecdotal statistic here. More often than not, doctors and nurse practitioners and healthcare providers are prescribing hormonal birth control to teenagers and college students and young adults, Generation Z, women, people in my generation, because they have something else that has pretty much nothing to do with sex going on in their lives that they need to quote unquote fix. And that was certainly the experience that I had when I was 15. I had horrifying, like hugely embarrassing, very, very bad clinical acne as a teenager. And I'm sure, honestly, it wasn't as bad as I say that it was, but it was pretty darn bad. Like, I had absolutely zero self-confidence. I already had pretty much no friends. I had tried every single topical oral medication available on the market over the shelf or over the counter at pharmacies or actually prescribed to me by a dermatologist, and literally nothing was working. And so I, feeling completely ugly, thinking that I looked like a thumb every day and not wanting to look at myself in the mirror, not having any self-confidence with boys or my friends or whatever, was convinced that I had to take care of this problem like immediately. And so I became one of the early patients of a drug called Accutane, which many of you might be familiar with, but is pretty much the strongest, craziest, most intense pharmaceutical drug for acne on the market in the United States of America today, and causes some pretty crazy side effects. You have to go in every single day. Oops, you guys are saying you might have lost connection. Bummer. Am I back? Is everybody losing connection? I just saw it on locals. I think everything else is fine on other platforms. I'm sorry, guys, if we lost you for a second on locals, but I'm glad that you guys are here. Good. Amen. Accutane causes some pretty crazy side effects in your defeating acne journey, which is why you have to go in about once a month to get your blood drawn to make sure that there's not any crazy side effects happening to your liver. And the government at the time, I don't know if they still do this, actually mandates that you are on 2 forms of birth control because it can cause some pretty crazy side effects to a preborn child if you are taking Accutane while you are pregnant. So they try to prevent this from happening by making sure that teenagers are on 2 forms of birth control the entire time that they are taking Accutane. Only some dermatologists will let you pledge abstinence by saying that's one of my forms of birth control, which I did as a teenager. But more often than not, they are going to stick you on hormonal birth control pills because they have to. And that was my secondary form of birth control. And then they will assign you condoms as like your second form of birth control. So I started taking hormonal birth control when I was 15. When I was a sophomore in high school, and never stopped. I had to take it because of Accutane. Accutane worked wonders in about 5 months. My skin totally cleared up. I was a totally different person. And then I ended up having to retake it. About 25% of people who take Accutane have to take it again. So I ended up having to retake it when I was a senior in high school and was still on hormonal birth control because my dermatologist told me that I was going to have to keep taking it or I would break out again and lose all of my confidence and go back to where I was pre-Accutane. Got to keep taking it. So I kept taking it. And by the time I got to after college, every single healthcare practitioner in my life continued to tell me I would not be myself. I wouldn't look myself. I would gain a bunch of weight. I would hate all of the intense period cramps and the pain that I would go through every month. I would break out like crazy. I would lose all of my self-confidence. I would feel like crap if I stopped taking it. So it was probably just best that I took it, even if I was not sexually active. That is what every single healthcare practitioner in my life continued to tell me after I was already prescribed. And I actually quit for a little while, and somebody tried to put it back on because they were like, you should just be on it anyway. It's really good for you. It regulates your hormones. It'll make you feel really good in college. And so I went back on, and it was like a whole journey, right? And I genuinely believed if I quit this drug before I was married and literally ready to have children, then I would get super fat. I'd become super ugly. I would lose all of my self-confidence, and I would just feel like crap all the time. So I kept convincing myself because I was listening to the experts. Thank you, John, for your donation in our YouTube super chat. You are awesome. Because I was listening to the experts that I had to keep taking this forever and ever and ever and ever and ever until I read a book. And I want you all to write this down because if you know a young woman in your life who is taking hormonal birth control, she needs to read this book. It's called This Is Your Brain on Birth Control. And I started reading that book fall of 2021 and could not put it down, read it in a single day because I felt like I was reading the story of my life. Every physician had been required to inform me of the physical side effects of birth control, that it could, but it's super rare, lead to strokes and blood clots and maybe a heart attack or certain types of cancer, but that doesn't normally happen. It's super, super rare, but they had to, by law, inform me of that in order to prescribe me those drugs. What nobody ever told me, and I suppose it should have been intuitive because I was studying biomedical sciences in college, what nobody ever told me was that regulating your hormones so substantially to prevent yourself from being able to get pregnant doesn't just regulate that process. That when you regulate your hormones, when you change their levels artificially, you are regulating so much more than your reproductive capacity. You're regulating everything in your body because the truth is your hormones are not something that happens to you. I think women today always like to say, oh, I'm just so hormonal. I'm so hormonal. And we almost use that as an excuse for when we feel like crap every single month on our period. I'm just hormonal. It's just my hormones. It's just my hormones. Hormones are not something that happen to you. Your hormones are you. And your hormonal makeup in your body quite literally determines every single aspect of you. What you look like, how you digest food, how you respond to stress, both positively and negatively, who you are attracted to, what your hobbies are, whether or not you actually enjoy those hobbies, what things smell like to you, what you smell like to other people, who you are attracted to and who's attracted to you, your sexual desire for your partner if you're in a long-term committed relationship, a whole host of things are automatically changed overnight, instantaneously when you start taking these drugs. It's not just regulating your menstrual cycle or your ability to reproduce and become pregnant. It changes everything about you. So I'm flipping through this book, This Is Your Brain on Birth Control, and just immediately felt like I had been reading the story of my teenage and young adult life all throughout high school and all throughout college, that I did have a baseline emotional status of neutrality. I was never like baseline joyful or happy, but kind of just always felt like meh all the time. And that's not to say I wouldn't experience happiness. I did, but it was pretty rare, and it was never the norm in my life. It was always just kind of meh. I regularly struggled with dating boys that clearly didn't work out, and those relationships I tried to make work, and I tried to make work, and I tried to make work all through high school and all through college and all through my young adult years until I met my fiance when I was quitting birth control. God bless. I was trying to make these things work, and then I discovered that while I was taking these pills, it was making me attracted to a totally different type of person. More often than not, a more feminine man, which is shocking. But that's the way that regulating your estrogen and progesterone is working, that you are desensitized to testosterone levels in other men and therefore don't seek out men with higher testosterone levels as a potential partner for the rest of your life. And I'm reading all of these things, that I wanted to stop listening to music, that I wanted to just put away all of my hobbies and all of my passions and everything. And I realized this is the story of my life, because this is what I have been doing voluntarily to my body for the last almost decade of my life. And this is not a unique story to me. This is a story that quite literally thousands of people have echoed that they have experienced throughout their life, some with much farther reaching consequences than anything I've ever experienced. Women who've gotten strokes, women who've experienced cancer, women who literally have had to take their breasts off because of cancer in their life, all because it stemmed back from them taking birth control. And I'm not here to tell their story. I'm only here to tell my story. And that's not to say that if you have PCOS or endometriosis, birth control might not be helpful to you. I am never going to pretend that I am the expert on taking these medications and who deserves to take them and who don't. But ultimately, in my experience, when I quit about 2 years ago, after experiencing literally a decade of anxiety, depression, of very dark thoughts, and that being the baseline of my life, of failed relationships that weren't working out, of losing interest in my hobbies and passions and interests, the day I quit, I never looked back. And today, about 2 years later, after my body has had a total opportunity to reset itself, I feel more happy, healthy, and more myself than I have ever felt before. Because I'm me again, not the version of me or the artificial me or the regulated me that I was while taking these medications. And I wanted to show you a few things before we round out the stream today. My friend is almost here, so I know it's a bit shorter today, but I'm excited to share this with you. If you look at a graph of how your hormone cascading system works, I wanted to show you this graph, and you can just Google this for yourself, like your hormones on birth control versus without. This is what your hormone levels are supposed to look like when you are naturally regulated and it's just your body doing its thing versus when you are on birth control below. Up top, you can see the green and the yellow, and each one has a spike and a fall, and those center around your estrogen and progesterone, and I want you to go do much more research on this than we can cover on the stream today, but you can tell there's a natural spike and a natural fall for each one of those hormones in your body, and that is because of your menstrual cycle. When you have peaks of estrogen, you can actually tell on women that you are physically more attracted, attractive to others, your face appears more symmetrical, you have a higher sex drive and greater desire for the people in your life. And when you have a big peak of progesterone and you are going into your menstrual cycle, you look and feel completely different. If you look down below at the almost flat-lined green and yellow lines, that is what your progesterone and estrogen look like when you are on the pill. Completely flat-lined. Nothing. Literally nothing. And then you are synthetically giving yourself estrogen the entire time, or progesterone the entire time, at regulated levels that are not at all where they are supposed to be during your normal and healthy menstrual cycle if you were not taking birth control pills the entire time. So when we flatline our hormones, that typically is why women are experiencing flatlined emotions, where their emotional status is so mid, so meh, so I don't really care. I've lost interest. I'm not super joyful. That's not my baseline. It just is what it is. And that, when I saw that graph for the first time in the book that I was reading, it made total sense to me. And the crazy thing is, I had seen that graph as a student in biomedical sciences, but none of my professors ever bothered to tell me this is what happens when we regulate these hormones, and you can't just regulate your menstrual cycle and your reproductive system in isolation. That's not how it works. You'll change every single thing about yourself. If we look at rates of contraceptive use and hormonal birth control today, I want you to know my story is not abnormal. My story is totally mainstream because we are doing this to the vast majority of teenage and young adult women in America today. If we pull up the National Institute of Health, for example, they'll tell us that oral contraceptives are the most common method of contraception used by adolescents, and that 44% of sexually active teenagers aged 15 to 19 use hormonal birth control pills and are therefore experiencing all of these crazy side effects, whether they realize it or not, day in and day out. But if we even move beyond this label of sexually active teenagers, the Guttmacher Institute, which is owned by Planned Parenthood, it's Planned Parenthood's research arm, is very straightforward with us that in 2018, 65% of all women, sexually active or not, aged 15 to 49 in the United States of America, are on a contraceptive method, the most popular of which being hormone package, all of the idea of taking birth control pills and sell women this idea as good. We tell them it's going to hurt on your period if you don't take these pills. You're going to be really ugly and have terrible acne if you don't take these pills. You're going to get really bad migraines if you don't take these pills. But by the way, mine got way worse while I was on the pill, and I haven't really had a serious migraine since I quit almost 2 years ago, going from monthly migraines to pretty much nothing. You're going to lose a bunch of weight if you take it. You're going to feel really good, and then you'll gain all of that weight if you quit. So you're going to get fat, and you're going to literally hate yourself if you don't take this pill. And we're starting to sell this younger and younger and younger and younger to children, to teenagers, far more than we ever have throughout the last 10 years when I started taking it at age 15, to the point that it has become so normalized and so desensitized, nobody ever even talks about it anymore. It's just normal that everybody is on birth control pills. If you go to Planned Parenthood's own website, they brag that Planned Parenthood provides a safe place for teens to come for healthcare and medically accurate sexuality education. Teens 18 and under can come to any of our health centers for several reproductive health services at no cost. And then they, on their own website, will brag for teens 18 and under, services include birth control. Options include 1 year supply of birth control pills at no cost, or your first depot injection. The depot injection is the birth control shot, which is also hormonal birth control. It's just given to you through an injection as like a vaccine versus a pill that you take every month, but has the exact same hormonal regulatory system as the pills. You get it every 3 months. It's a safe, convenient, and private, that's an interesting word, birth control method that works really well if you always get it on time. And of course, a million other things that they do all the time at Planned Parenthood. Interestingly, then you go to a different part of their website and ask, can teens get free birth control from Planned Parenthood? Privately. That's an interesting word that they used on the other page. If you are a teen, can you get free birth control at Planned Parenthood? It depends on the individual health center. All Planned Parenthood centers are committed to providing services at the lowest possible cost and ensuring that financial services and concerns are not a barrier to necessary health care. It depends on your clinic, essentially. So not only can you get it if you're 18 and under, but chances are you can probably get it for free. And interestingly, this is a trick question, is responsible for writing and drafting the vast majority of sex ed education modules and curriculum for public schools across the country? Anybody want to take a guess? It's kind of a trick question. I know there's a little bit of a lag on the stream. Some of you are starting to put it in there. Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is responsible for writing, drafting, and executing the vast vast majority of sex ed curriculum modules for schools across the country. So it's hardly any surprise to me that they will tell you you need to be on birth control, and we'll just give it to you for free. Come to our clinics and we'll hand it out to you like candy, even if you're 18 and under. If you go to kidshealth.org, that is literally the website that we are on right now, kidshealth.org, how can I get on the pill without telling my parents? And there's an entire instructional module here to make sure that if you feel like you can't talk to your parents, you can still get birth control. If you make an appointment with your doctor or gynecologist or go to Planned Parenthood, you can go, and private confidentiality, those private conversations will prevent your parents from knowing anything. Refinery 29, how teens can get birth control without their parents knowing. An entire article that's multiple pages long teaching kids how they can go out of their way to get birth control pills prescribed to them. In other words, to change every single thing about themselves, their body, how their body functions, and who they are as a person with their personality. Period. End of story. Of course, as I mentioned, we already know the effects of hormonal birth control from a body perspective throughout all of our research that we've done on birth control pills in the United States of America. But there's several things that we've never really truly asked or answered. And a lot of that comes back to this word that I used earlier that I said we would come back to, mood. So we know that there are, of course, hormonal changes, which can lead to unwanted side effects like acne. Ha! And I was told repeatedly I had to be on this pill to prevent acne in my life. Interesting. Migraines. Birth control may make migraines worse or better. Yeah, they made mine a whole hell of a lot worse, to the point I had to start taking prescription migraine medication in addition to my birth control pills. That it can change your breasts, including breast tenderness and enlargement. It'll change your appetite because, spoiler alert, your hormones tell you when you are hungry and when you are not. Lowered risk of pregnancy, changes to the consistency of cervical mucus. Interesting. To decrease your chance of becoming pregnant. Of course, they don't say prevent getting pregnant, so birth control is a bit of a misnomer, in my opinion. But anybody ever wanted to ask how changing the consistency of your cervical mucus impacts your reproductive health long term? Because we're starting to see a pretty substantial increase, at least correlational, if not causational, we don't know the answer to that question, of entire generations of women who have taken hormonal birth control pills and now cannot get pregnant after decades on the pill. No eggs, vaginal irritation, changes to your blood pressure, including risk of high blood pressure, that it can make you grow hair everywhere, including on your face, by the way, because some artificial progestins that are in hormonal birth control pills mimic that of testosterone, the structure of testosterone, and can make you grow facial hair and hair where you really don't want it. Possible cancer protection. Interesting, because most birth control pills will actually cause cancer in a very small, unusual number of patients, that it'll basically stop your period. It'll just completely stop, which is super healthy for something that's supposed to be happening every 28 days, right? It can cause weight fluctuations, bloating and nausea, blood clotting. It could reduce your acne, but of course up there in the top corner, it says it may create your acne, which is fascinating. And this big nebulous thing, that's the one thing we have refused to study up until now, and that is mood changes. In other words, your mood, how you feel, in a different connotation, your mental health is impacted from taking hormonal birth control pills. It's something that we've refused to really research in depth. We've refused to ask the big questions about. We've refused to go out of our way to find the answers to. But I find absolutely zero coincidence whatsoever that hormonal birth control pills have become normal for teenagers, with 65% of women 15 to 49 taking these pills and 44% of sexually active teenagers taking them. No coincidence whatsoever that this study we talked about a few months ago has shown us that in 2021, nearly 1 in 3 teenage girls seriously considered taking her own life, up 60% from a decade ago. In the last decade, what has become overwhelmingly normalized? Being prescribed hormonal birth control for everything, not just for being sexually active, but to stop period cramps or to stop really bad acne or to prevent migraines, which is ridiculous because it's causing all of those things. 60% higher today than a decade ago is the teenage female suicide rate, which now has climbed to 30%. Suicidation, not suicide attempt, I should say. 30%. And we still try to package this one-size-fits-all solution for teenage girls. The world is like a zoo says it perfectly in our Getter chat right now. Humans are so strange. We are trying to reorder nature. We are. So let me be the crunchy granola old person here at 26 to tell all of you teenagers, you do not need birth control pills to thrive. You don't. In fact, if your doctor is trying to regularly shove these down your throat, quite literally, you probably should find another doctor or at least get a second opinion. I'm never going to be the person to tell you that this is the specific decision that you need to make in your own medical history and with your doctor and in your own healthcare life. I get it. I took it for 9 years. But I think at least it is high time that we be brutally honest about the impact that birth control pills are making on our society. Not just preventing pregnancy, which in and of itself is pretty concerning, in my opinion. Not just changing societal attitudes about sex. Not just giving you a higher risk of stroke and cancer and blood clots and everything else. But actually changing you. Who you are. Who you're attracted to. The type of man that you're dating. Who could become your husband later on. What your sex life is even like. Whether you like to listen to music. How you respond to stress, what your hobbies are, and how often you want to do those hobbies. I could not recommend at least reading this book, This Is Your Brain on Birth Control by Dr. Sarah Hill, enough. At the very baseline, read that book. But if there's at all a pringling curiosity in you today that you want to try life without hormonal birth control pills, I dare you. I dare you. Quit for 6 months and just see what happens. And men, if you think that this doesn't apply to you, male hormonal birth control pills have officially entered human testing and are very, very close to being on the market. I always like to say when I talk about birth control on college campuses or in my content, there is literally no way in hell men would ever put up with this shit. They wouldn't. They would never take a pill that changes every single thing about them. Their sex drive, who they're attracted to, what things smell like, how they respond to stress, their weight, what they look like, everything. They would never do it. The pressure's coming for you next. And I think it's high time at least women be honest with each other about the dangerous, devastating side effects of this medication. But for men, it's coming for you too. So if you didn't think that conversation applied to you, it sure as hell does here in the next couple of months, literally right around the corner. All right, you guys, that is it for the stream today. My sweet, sweet friend is here, and I'm so excited to have her visiting me in Miami, Florida. So whoop, whoop. Gonna have some fun with Savannah today. Thank you guys all so much for watching on whatever platform you're on right now. If you could do me a huge favor before we go and hit that follow or subscribe button on wherever you are watching, YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, Getter, or of course Locals. You guys are already following, so you're one step ahead. It means the absolute world to me and makes a huge difference in my life as an independent creator. No post-stream Q&A today because my friend is here to hang out, but we're gonna have a nice long fun one tomorrow over on Locals, which you guys are all invited to. So unbelievably grateful for each and every one of you. Quit your birth control, please, for the love of all that is good, or at least give yourself some time to try life without it. And we will see you tomorrow back on the stream at 3 p.m. Eastern. Bye, guys.